The cold wind howled through the streets of the small town, causing leaves to rustle and tumble along the pavement. The moon cast an eerie glow, turning the shadows into strange and haunting shapes. Robert hurried along, his coat pulled tightly around him, his breath visible in the chilly air. He had received a call earlier that evening. His beloved grandmother was in the hospital, her health rapidly declining. With a heavy heart, he made his way to the hospital, hoping to see her one last time. The hospital corridors were sterile and quiet, the only sounds being the distant beeping of machines and the soft shuffling of nurses' shoes. Robert found his way to his grandmother's room, the door slightly ajar. He pushed it open gently, his heart sinking at the sight before him. His grandmother, once a vibrant and strong woman, now lay frail and weak in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires snaked around her, connecting her to various monitors and IV bags. "Grandma," he said softly, his voice cracking with emotion. Her eyes fluttered open, and a weak smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Robert," she whispered, her voice raspy and tired. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her, taking her wrinkled hand in his. "I'm here, Grandma. How are you feeling?" She sighed, her gaze distant. "Oh, my dear, I'm tired. So tired, but I'm glad you're here." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm glad I could come see you, Grandma. I've brought you some food from your favorite bakery. Maybe you'll have a little appetite?" She looked at the bag he held out, but her eyes remained distant. "Thank you, dear." "But I'm not hungry," he frowned, concern gnawing at him. "You need to eat, Grandma. It'll help you get better." She shook her head, her eyes suddenly focusing on him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "No, Robert. Eating won't change what's coming." He leaned in, his brows furrowed. "What do you mean, Grandma?" She sighed, her gaze drifting to the window where the moonlight streamed in. "There are things beyond our understanding, Robert. Forces that have their own plans. I've seen glimpses." He didn't know what to make of her words. Was it the delirium of illness that was causing her to speak like this? He tried to dismiss her words as the ramblings of a fevered mind. "You're just tired, Grandma. You'll feel better after some rest." She smiled sadly, her grip on his hand weakening. "You're a good boy, Robert. But there are things you don't know. Things you'll discover when the time is right." Before he could respond, a nurse entered the room, checking the machines and adjusting the IV. Robert stood up, giving his grandmother's hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'll be back tomorrow, Grandma. Get some rest." As he walked out of the hospital room, he couldn't shake the unease that had settled in his chest. Her words had left him unsettled, a strange mixture of confusion and fear clouding his thoughts. He stopped by the nurse's station on his way out, asking about his grandmother's condition. The nurse's expression turned somber. "I'm sorry to inform you that your grandmother passed away last night." His heart dropped, and for a moment the world seemed to spin around him. "Whoa, what? But I just saw her. She was talking to me." The nurse's eyes were sympathetic. Sometimes patients rally before the end. It's not uncommon for them to have moments of clarity before they go. Robert stumbled out of the hospital in a daze, his mind racing to process the news. The wind cut through his coat, but he barely felt it. He had just spoken to his grandmother. How could she be gone? Over the next few days, the details of her passing were a blur. The funeral came and went, a somber affair surrounded by friends and family. Robert found himself haunted by her words, by the strange and unsettling feeling that had lingered in her hospital room. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her passing than met the eye. Late one night, unable to sleep, Robert found himself back at the hospital. The corridors were even quieter now, the hushed whispers of nurses echoing faintly. He stood outside his grandmother's room, his hand hovering over the door handle. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the moon, and there in the hospital bed lay his grandmother. Except it wasn't quite her. Her form seemed translucent, ethereal, as if she were a mirage. She turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and longing. "Robert," she whispered, her voice echoing in the stillness. He stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "Grandma, is that really you?" She nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I couldn't leave without saying goodbye. There's something I need you to understand." He sank into the chair beside her bed, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. "What's happening, Grandma? What did you mean by those things you said?" She reached out a hand, and he felt a chill as her fingers brushed his skin. "There's a world beyond this one, Robert, a world of spirits and mysteries. I've been given a chance to tell you. There are forces at play, ancient and powerful. They shape our lives in ways we can't imagine." He listened, captivated and terrified by her words. "What do they want from me, Grandma?" Her eyes bore into his, an intensity that mirrored the night he had seen her last. "You have a role to play, a choice to make. The path you choose will determine the fate of not just you, but the balance between the worlds." He struggled to comprehend the enormity of what she was saying. "I don't understand. What choice?" She smiled sadly, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You'll know when the time comes, Robert. Trust your instincts, and remember that love and courage will guide you." Before he could respond, she began to fade, her form becoming more insubstantial by the second. "Wait, Grandma, don't go!" Her voice echoed in the room, a whisper carried by the wind. "Goodbye, my dear. Our paths will cross again." And then she was gone. The room was empty, the hospital bed vacant. Robert sat there for a long while, the weight of her words sinking in. Eventually, he stood up, his heart heavy, but his resolve strong. He didn't know what lay ahead, what challenges and mysteries awaited him, but he was determined to face them with the love and courage his grandmother had spoken of. As he walked out of the hospital, the first light of dawn touched the horizon. The town came to life around him, but he carried with him a secret, a connection to a world beyond, and the knowledge that his journey was just beginning.